My greedy uncle and his spoiled daughter kicked me out of my late father's hedge fund and cybersecurity firm, claiming I was just an uneducated line coder living off family charity. They wiped my name from our proprietary high-frequency trading platform, locked me out of the main database, deleted 7 years of my encrypted development archives, and prepared to take the company public in an $800 million Wall Street IPO. But they made one massive, catastrophic mistake in their rush to become global financial elites. My name is Clara, and I didn't just write the security framework for that financial algorithm. I embedded an undetectable, deep-level forensic protocol that tracks every stolen dollar back to its origin. On the morning of their grand NASDAQ launch, I didn't just crash their fraudulent stock. I broadcasted their illegal laundering channels directly to the Federal Reserve, seized control of the entire server architecture live on international broadcasting, and watched the FBI drag them off the trading floor in heavy chains. For 6 long, grueling, and agonizing years after my father passed away under mysterious circumstances, I worked like an invisible, unpaid ghost in the dimly lit basement office of Sterling Financial Systems. My father, Dr. Marcus Sterling, was a world-renowned pioneer in algorithmic trading, quantitative mathematics, and financial data encryption. He was a brilliant scientist, but his biggest vulnerability was his trusting, generous nature when it came to his own blood. When he fell terminally ill, my uncle Richard used legal loopholes and corporate maneuvers to manipulate the board of directors, installing himself as managing partner and executive chairman. Shortly after, Richard brought in his arrogant, lazy daughter, Chloe, appointing her as chief financial officer, despite the fact that Chloe couldn't balance a basic corporate ledger, couldn't explain the difference between a hedge fund and an equity bond, and spent her entire week shopping in Paris, flying on private jets, and posting curated photos of her artificial billionaire lifestyle on social media. I inherited my father's mathematical mind, his sharp eye for structural patterns, and his relentless, obsessive work ethic. While Chloe was throwing lavish multi-thousand-dollar birthday parties in Manhattan and flexing designer clothes to her followers, I was locked inside the cold, windowless Level 3 server vault for 18 hours a day. I poured my blood, sweat, tears, and entire youth into completing my father's ultimate legacy project, a real-time microsecond risk detection and autonomous trading artificial intelligence codenamed Apex Sentinel. Apex Sentinel was not just a basic financial script. It was a digital miracle. It was an ultra-advanced neural platform designed to detect high-frequency market manipulation, execute microsecond hedge positions, and provide ironclad, unbreakable encryption for international banking transactions. On the global commercial market, the licensing rights for such a breakthrough were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But to me, it was never about personal wealth, luxury cars, or corporate status. Apex Sentinel was my father's soul distilled into pure mathematics. It was the solemn promise I made to him on his deathbed, that his life's work would protect ordinary investors and bring total transparency to a corrupt financial world. My reward for 6 years of grueling solitary scientific dedication arrived on a freezing rainy Tuesday morning in late October. Uncle Richard summoned me up to the glass-walled executive penthouse suite on the top floor for what he claimed was a routine technical asset review. When I stepped into the soundproof, mahogany-paneled boardroom, Richard wasn't sitting behind his desk. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, holding a crystal glass of whiskey, looking down at the city skyline like a king surveying his personal domain. Sitting at the long marble conference table was Chloe, wearing a $2,000 designer suit, swirling a glass of champagne with a smug, condescending smile. On the polished table sat a single sheet of paper, an immediate, non-negotiable termination notice paired with a predatory, lifelong non-disclosure agreement. Richard didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye as he pushed a cheap plastic pen across the marble table toward me. He told me in a cold, monotone voice that my presence at Sterling Financial Systems was no longer required. He claimed that because I was emotionally unstable, antisocial, and lacked corporate executive vision, I had become a massive liability to the company's upcoming international expansion. He announced that Chloe was stepping in as the sole creator, Chief Technology Officer, and intellectual property owner of the Apex Sentinel project effective immediately. Chloe leaned back in her high-end leather chair, taking a slow sip of champagne, smirking right into my face. She told me that her name had already been officially registered with the Federal Patent Office and the Securities and Exchange Commission, as the primary inventor of Apex Sentinel. She boasted that a massive syndicate of Wall Street investment banks and European private equity funds had already agreed to underwrite their upcoming public stock launch, valuing the firm at a staggering $800 million. "You should be grateful, Clara," Chloe sneered, setting her crystal glass down with a sharp clink against the marble. "We gave you a comfortable salary, while you hid down in your little basement lab playing with numbers. But real finance requires power, influence, and high society brand value. We're taking this family to the very top of the financial world. And frankly, a quiet, awkward girl with messy hair who spends her life staring at computer code just doesn't fit our luxury brand image." When I refused to pick up the pen and refused to sign away my father's life's work, Richard's polite mask shattered completely. He slammed his heavy fist onto the mahogany table, hit the intercom, and called in 2 armed private corporate security guards, ordering them to forcibly drag me out of the building. I watched in absolute disbelief as those guards marched me down the private service elevator, carried me out through the rear loading docks, and through my personal duffel bag, containing my father's original, faded handwritten research journals, straight into a dirty rain puddle in the alleyway behind the skyscraper. The lead guard stood over me and warned me that if I ever set foot within a 2-mile radius of Sterling Financial property again, Richard would have me arrested for corporate espionage and federal cyberterrorism. I sat there on the freezing wet asphalt of that alleyway, holding my father's soaked journals against my chest, watching the heavy metal security gates slide shut and lock me out. They thought I was destroyed. They assumed that a quiet software engineer who had spent her entire life surrounded by servers, diagnostic tools, and mathematical algorithms would break down, cry, fall into depression, and quietly fade away into poverty. But Richard and Chloe were slick corporate salespeople. They understood stock speculation, public relations, and tax evasion, but they knew absolutely nothing about deep-level system architecture or advanced cryptography. They viewed software like physical cash in a vault. They foolishly believed that whoever physically held the server keys was the absolute owner of the intelligence inside them. What those greedy frauds failed to realize was that during my long silent nights alone in that subterranean server vault over the past 3 years, I had anticipated their ultimate betrayal. I had watched Richard slowly divert tens of millions of dollars from the firm's client pension funds into unregistered offshore shell accounts in Panama and the Cayman Islands. I knew that the very second Apex Sentinel achieved 100% operational stability, they would attempt to wipe my name, erase my father's memory, and walk away with an absolute fortune. So when I compiled the final core operating kernel for Apex Sentinel into the master mainframe arrays 4 months prior, I didn't just program the neural trading networks and risk algorithms. I embedded an invisible deep-level forensic protocol deep within the central processing architecture, known in advanced cybersecurity as the Zero Trust Audit Trigger. The Zero Trust Protocol was an absolute masterpiece of digital engineering. It was programmed to keep the high-frequency trading engines, automated liquidity pools, and encryption keys operating smoothly only if the primary mainframe received a daily, multi-layered biometric handshake signal from my personal, decentralized server at home. If the mainframe missed that encrypted authorization handshake for more than 7 consecutive days, the Zero Trust Protocol would automatically trigger a quiet, self-sustaining forensic lock inside the system microprocessors. It wouldn't crash the server abruptly. Instead, it would immediately switch the software from execution mode to forensic audit mode. The system would freeze all outgoing trades, record every internal transaction, flag every unregistered offshore account transfer, and display critical security compliance errors across every terminal in the company. And because Chloe didn't possess the basic engineering intellect to read raw assembly code or network telemetry logs, she had no idea the Zero Trust Protocol even existed. She just walked into the executive demonstration room, looked at the glowing green charts on the dynamic screens, and assumed she was holding the key to $800 million. Exactly 7 days after they threw me into the rainy alleyway, the countdown expired. That afternoon, Chloe was attempting to run a live trading simulation for a group of senior technical auditors and managing partners sent directly by Wall Street's top underwriting banks. Naturally, when she initialized the primary trading engine, the master dashboard didn't show a stable green operational status. Instead, every display screen in the trading center turned dark amber, flashing critical compliance failures, frozen execution queues, and unauthorized access alerts. Panic set in fast. At 2:15 p.m., my private encrypted phone rang. It was an unlisted corporate burner line. I answered calmly. On the other end of the line was Chloe. The arrogant, condescending and smug tone she had used in the penthouse boardroom 7 days ago was completely gone. Her voice was trembling, cracking with pure panic and hysterical desperation. She screamed at me, accusing me of hacking the corporate servers, demanding to know why the system was refusing her administrative commands and throwing critical logic errors. She threatened to call the FBI and have me locked away in a federal penitentiary for 20 years for malicious corporate sabotage. I sat quietly by the window of my small, modest apartment, sipping warm tea, looking out over the city skyline, and spoke in a voice that was dead calm and ice-cold. "Chloe," I said softly, "if you are truly the brilliant chief financial officer, quantitative mind, and sole inventor listed on that multi-million-dollar patent application, then clearing a basic system security flag should take you 2 minutes. Why are you begging a talentless basement coder for help?" Before she could scream another word, I ended the call and turned off the phone. I didn't just sit in my apartment waiting, though. Passive waiting is for victims, and I wanted total, absolute, and unrecoverable destruction. Over the past 7 days, while Chloe was blindly celebrating her fake triumph, I had been working nonstop with Special Agent Marcus Vance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Division, along with senior forensic auditors from the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Homeland Security. I provided them with irrefutable, ironclad digital evidence. My original timestamp source code repositories dating back 6 years, cryptographic proof of my digital signatures embedded inside the microchips, raw mathematical logs, and forensic banking trails proving that Richard had illegally forged my father's corporate share transfer documents while he was incapacitated on his deathbed. Together, we carefully planned the ultimate trap, aiming directly at the most prestigious and high-profile moment in the global financial calendar, the NASDAQ opening bell ceremony at the financial headquarters in Times Square. The Times Square Trading Center was an absolute spectacle of corporate luxury and financial power. Over 300 high-profile guests filled the Grand Glass Auditorium, billionaire investment bankers, foreign diplomats, corporate lawyers, government regulators, and live international news crews with 4K broadcast cameras lined up along the raised balconies, streaming the event to millions of viewers worldwide. Richard and Chloe had spared no expense to make this morning their personal crowning achievement. In the center of the main hall, massive 60-foot high-definition LED displays projected glowing animated charts, live market tickers, and promotional videos celebrating the public launch of Sterling Financial. Chloe stood near the center stage wearing a custom $3,000 designer outfit, holding a glass of vintage champagne, speaking into a wireless microphone, bragging to reporters about how she spent countless sleepless nights in the laboratory, developing the groundbreaking AI algorithm. Richard stood beside the lead managing director of the Wall Street Underwriting Group, holding an engraved gold pen over a leather-bound IPO contract worth $800 million. "Today, ladies and gentlemen," Richard declared into the microphone, his voice booming through the master audio system, "Sterling Financial Systems opens a new era in global quantitative finance. We are officially taking our revolutionary platform public." The lead investment banker smiled, bringing his pen down toward the signature line, while Richard reached out his hand to press the ceremonial opening bell. "I strongly suggest you keep your hand off that button, Richard." A quiet, crystal-clear voice echoed through the venue audio system. The sound carried through the master speakers with such absolute authority and clarity that the entire trading floor fell into an instant dead silence. The background music stopped. The news camera operators immediately rotated their heavy lenses toward the main entrance. The heavy double doors at the entrance swung wide open. I stepped into the room, walking steadily down the center aisle. I was wearing a sharp, midnight black tailored suit, holding a sleek industrial diagnostic terminal. Walking directly behind me were 6 uniformed United States Marshals and 4 senior forensic agents from the FBI Cyber and Financial Crimes Bureau. Richard's face instantly transformed from a proud, smiling red to a pale, ghostly, and sickly white. He practically lunged for the podium microphone, screaming at the venue security guards to shoot me or drag me out, telling the crowd that I was a mentally unstable, disgruntled former employee who had been fired for incompetence. "Security won't step an inch near me, Richard. I said, my voice completely steady as I reached the stage and walked up the steps, standing right between Chloe and the billionaire investment bankers. Because I am executing a federal court order issued 2 hours ago by the United States District Court to freeze all assets and conduct an immediate forensic audit of the intellectual property you are attempting to sell. Chloe broke into a cold, heavy sweat, her hands shaking so violently she dropped her champagne glass onto the marble floor, where it shattered into dozens of pieces. She stammered that the IPO was legally compliant, and that I had no legal authority to disrupt their private corporate launch. If this algorithm is truly your creation, Chloe, and if the platform contains real functional code, I said, looking her dead in the eye, then you should have zero objections to a quick 5-second diagnostic scan of the primary server link. The lead investment banker pulled his gold pen back, his eyes narrowing into cold slits as he looked back and forth between Richard's panicked face and my calm, unwavering composure. Hold the contract, the banker commanded his legal team. Let her run the scan. I didn't wait another microsecond. I raised my terminal, pointed the wireless diagnostic interface at the master control server rack on stage, and tapped the screen to trigger the final override signal. A deafening, shrill emergency siren screeched through the auditorium speakers. The massive 60-foot LED displays behind the stage suddenly glitched out, breaking into thousands of red lines of corrupted binary code, before resetting completely. Instead of showing Chloe's promotional slides or stock tickers, the giant screens began scrolling at lightning speed through thousands of pages of my original, timestamped code commits, my father's handwritten mathematical formulas, and live interactive financial diagrams displaying Richard's secret Panama shell accounts in glaring neon yellow highlights. And right in the center of the main 60-foot display, in massive glowing bold red text, the system output read, algorithmic integrity corrupted. Zero Trust Protocol activated. Fraudulent assets detected. All permissions revoked. Sole intellectual property of Clara Sterling. A massive collective gasp exploded from the audience of hundreds of Wall Street elites. Dozens of news reporters rushed toward the stage, flashbulbs popping like a lightning storm, capturing every single second of the absolute disaster on live international TV. What is the meaning of this? The lead investment banker roared, slamming his heavy fist onto the conference table. He turned to Richard, his face contorted in pure, unbridled fury. You absolute criminal frauds. You tried to sell our banking syndicate $800 million worth of stolen, dysfunctional, and laundered software. Chloe completely lost control. Her knees buckled beneath her and she collapsed onto the hard floor, weeping hysterically, grabbing her father's coat, blabbering incoherent excuses. Richard tried to back away slowly toward the dark backstage exit, attempting to disappear into the crowd of technicians. Richard Sterling. Chloe Sterling. The lead United States Marshal called out, his voice booming across the quieted trading floor. Four marshals stepped up onto the stage, blocking every single exit point. The lead officer pulled out a thick stack of federal arrest warrants, stepping directly in front of Richard. Richard Sterling, Chloe Sterling. The marshal announced loudly for every live news camera to record, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, grand larceny, corporate IP theft, securities fraud, and illegal international money laundering. The officers grabbed Richard's arms, twisting them behind his back and snapping heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists. Richard lost all his corporate polish, screaming obscenities at me, trying to kick at the agents as they dragged him across the stage. Chloe was lifted off the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her designer suit rumpled and her face covered in tears as she was led past the very investors, journalists, and bankers she had spent months trying to deceive. I walked slowly over to the main server console, picked up the physical master security drive, and looked down at Richard as the officers forced him toward the exit doors. My father built this firm on honor, truth, and mathematical integrity to protect human lives and financial security, I said, my voice echoing clearly through the entire quieted room. You tried to build an empire on theft and lies, and you forgot the most fundamental rule of accounting. Every debt eventually comes due, and reality doesn't bend to greed. The legal aftermath was swift, brutal, and absolute. With the federal warrants executed and my original code repositories validated by the Supreme Court's Intellectual Property Tribunal, the state courts immediately stripped Richard and Chloe of all corporate shares and administrative authority. The forged share transfers were completely annulled, and full unencumbered ownership of Sterling Financial Systems, its research vaults, server architecture, patents, and headquarters was legally awarded back to me as Dr. Marcus Sterling's true legal heir and the proven author of Apex Sentinel. Within 2 weeks, I walked back through the front doors of the headquarters, not through the rear alleyway, but as chief executive officer. I fired Richard's corrupt board members, dismantled the fake marketing departments, and reinstated every honest engineer, researcher, and technician who had been pushed aside and mistreated under Chloe's fake management. I uploaded the biological decryption keys from my home server, clearing the Zero Trust protocol and stabilizing the real Apex Sentinel platform once and for all. But instead of taking the company public for $800 million to enrich greedy Wall Street speculators, I restructured the software into a transparent, open-access financial watchdog tool, partnering directly with regulatory agencies, nonprofit institutions, and small investor networks to ensure that my father's technology would prevent financial fraud across the globe. As for Richard and Chloe, their offshore bank accounts were completely frozen and seized by federal prosecutors to pay back tens of millions of dollars in fines and damages to defrauded clients. Today, they are serving a non-parole 14-year sentence in a maximum security federal penitentiary, spending their days doing hard manual labor, completely broken by the very greed that drove them to betray their own family. The fake founders were erased from history, the truth was fully restored, and my father's legacy was finally right where it belonged, in the hands of the daughter who built it from the ground up. My toxic relatives thought they could throw me out into the rain, erase my father's memory, and sell my intellect for a quick fortune, but they learned the ultimate unchangeable law of nature. An empire built on fraud will always crumble the moment true code executes. Today, Richard and Chloe are staring at 4 stone walls inside a federal cell. Sterling Financial is leading an international ethical revolution, and Apex Sentinel is protecting thousands of innocent people every single second. But the battle to protect real innovation from corrupt forces is far from over. Next week, a corrupt rival hedge fund manager attempts to sabotage our global server network by hiring an undercover mercenary hacker to infiltrate our secondary data vault and taint our primary algorithms. If you want to see how Clara uses her high-tech counter-hacking grid to trap the intruder inside the server room and expose the rival manager on national television, make sure to smash that subscribe button right now, leave a like, and drop a comment below sharing your thoughts on Clara's ultimate payback. See you in the next story.